Namaste.
Namaste.
Okay, welcome. So how many, this is the first time you've met with me? Anybody else first time? Yes, first time. Okay, well, welcome. You know, you're going to find out soon enough what you're getting into. Or perhaps not. We'll see. All right, my name is Satri, and this is Satchamai.
Hello.
And Satchamai.
Oh, that's right. Are we live? Oh, I get to do my little greeting.
Okay.
Yes. So I welcome all of you here. Thank you for coming. And then we have our Crowdcast crowd from all over the world who joins us. And so I want to say thank you for joining us. We're here in Connecticut. And now I'm going to turn it over to Satri. I try to keep it simple.
So this is the third satsang I've done since I've come to. We were in Boston, and now we're here. And tonight and tomorrow night are the last two segments. So we're keeping the continuity for those who are on the virtual reality version of this. And so we're exploring 4 questions. But before I get into that, I just want to kind of bring the intention of why we're here together, because it's my work, it's my realization that life is purposeful, and that you're here, each of you are here, for as the outcome of the purpose that in fact has been living you, even if you don't know exactly what that purpose is. It could have you pulled to love. It could have you pulled to security or money or friends or fame or influence or position or power. But it's the same pull or push that's living us all. And when we come to the spiritual path, the nature of that push or pull starts unfolding. And we begin to realize that something else is living me than what I thought was living me. Something else is organizing the direction of my life. And why? Because at the moment of awakening, should that have happened to all of you or not, there is this recognition that the awakening was the most important event of your life up until that point. The nature of spiritual awakening is a thrust out of the habitual paradigm that we take on, the content, the conditioning, the story of ourselves, what we thought was what we should do and what we shouldn't do, the consequences and the histories and the choices and the stories associated with them of our own actions in trying to come into our adulthood, trying to come into life. So when we awaken, we step out of that paradigm in some fashion or another. It can be a sense of being able to see that you're no longer the ego. I'm no longer this person I thought I was. Or it could be an experience of being connected to something greater than yourself, or a sense of oneness that leaves an impression on you that you never get over. That's the nature of the awakening. In most cases, almost all cases, you can't forget the moment of your awakening. Of course, there are children who have moments of awakening and it's more confusing for them, but for most people where awakening is part of the organizing principle of their adult life, you're very well aware that something happened. And when we have people first come to us, everyone who's interested in participating in programs, we ask that they do a Skype call or a coaching call. And that's one of the questions we ask is, are you aware of having an awakening or some sense of that? And usually, 60, 70% know they've awakened. And the other 30% didn't recognize that was the awakening. They remember it because of the circumstances. They remember it because of the loss or the grief. They remember it because of whatever were the circumstances around them. They don't recognize that the shift had occurred within their own ability to perceive and experience. Because that's what awakens. What awakens is the nature of the perceiver that we are, not the person. I call it the what we are versus the who we are. We wake up out of our who-ness, out of our personality, out of our ego, out of our usual orientation. And there is something that happens when we come out of that shroud, that shell, that allows us to access a quality of being that was not available before, a quality of a relationship with existence that's qualitatively and extraordinarily different than what we had experienced before. And from that point on, our relationship to the who we are starts being from, instead of the who being related to another part of the who, it's from this what consciousness, this new consciousness, looking at the who we are. So it's a possibly transformative shift in that the old structures that defined us and bound us previously are no longer as convincing or gripping. We have some perspective, some way to stand. Of course, sometimes it's quite a shock. Most awakenings are bad news. Is you begin to wake up to how you are creating the misery of your life. And this is one of the evidences that true awakening has occurred, is the person's ability to come into life from that humility, from that recognition that the orientation is, how am I creating this? What role am I having in this arising? Rather than being the usual victim or victimizer of the people and circumstances in our life. So this is shifting in consciousness. And essentially all my work is about shifting your consciousness. It's not necessarily about changing your personality or your circumstances. All of that will happen naturally when we shift our consciousness. And what's the natural part of it is we align with universal principles of the fact that we're all interconnected, that we're all drawn from this one same principle, that there is no other human being that's substantially different than us. Everyone has anger, everyone has sorrow, everyone has jealousy, everyone has grief, everyone in the species of human beings, and there's even some reflection of this in the animal world, have this sense of connection with others, interdependent connection with others. When we wake up to that, there is just a natural recognition where we're separating ourselves, a natural recognition of where we're judging others or condemning others, and how that is actually impacting our experience of others, of our situations, and of our life. So we come into what I call a natural authority. We become the one that can perceive what's working and not working in our lives, in ourselves, where before we perhaps didn't have a clue, we were confused, we were so busy in the structure, blaming or accusing or shaming ourselves, that we couldn't see accurately what was going on. So the nature of awakening is, I like to say, getting real. Get real. We start seeing things as they are. We can take our story out of it, all the history of resentment, or what our mother or father were, and how we are in reaction, either in compliance or rebellion. We begin to separate out that essential quality of what we are from our investment with the conditioning that we took on when we took on a body. And this is what it is to come into this dimension. It's like a virtual game, except, and you have to play a game, you have to have a piece. And this piece is actually virtual from another dimension than this dimension. But it's only in this dimension that consciousness can screw it up so effectively that we suffer. And we know this before we take a birth. Most people who awaken know what they were getting into before they chose a birth. So the whole idea is that, in fact, we chose to be here. I mean, I know many, many people, especially people who have very developed awareness, who are clear that this is the wrong planet. Certainly, these are the wrong parents. This is the wrong place for me. I should have turned left at Venus, you know. But that is actually the truth. The truth is we chose to be here. And the sooner, when we awaken, the sooner we can realize that life is purposeful, that it has a movement, a developmental movement that will occur when we start recognizing the structures that are holding this purpose. And part of these structures is that life is constantly trying to show you your next lesson. It's constantly trying to show you the thing you're not seeing. And you're pushing it away. You're transferring that into a situational event or a relational event. You're not able to see the lesson when it comes. Often, we do eventually get the lesson, but there's no guarantee that until you awaken, it's very, very hard to come out of this arena of missing the opportunity of life. So my awakening happened in January 4th, 1998. It was 20 years this year. And the nature of that awakening was, I was an architect before for 20 years, 25 years, and I was not looking for it. And when it came, it was full tilt boogie. All boosters blew me out of any orientation of my who-ness. I just popped out. And I do know that some awakenings have much greater impact on a person's life than others, proportional to how ripe we are, how contracted or relaxed we have discovered how to be in life. If we're still struggling with getting what we want and avoiding what we don't want, we're still caught up in the lesson of life, then we're in a contracted consciousness. So when the awakening comes, it's more forced. But if we come to some degree of maturity, and for me, I was 50 in that year, or just was turning 50, there was enough individual development that by that point, without even me knowing it, I was ready. And when the universe came, pop, I popped out. And I popped out in such a way that from the very first moment, I saw all the things I'm talking about. I knew it in like a gestalt, all at once. I didn't know I knew it. I felt this extraordinary freedom, extraordinary clarity, extraordinary love, extraordinary connection. But I didn't know what that meant. It took years for this to be discerned, to be recognized that this was there all along. But I just was separate from it. I couldn't see it. I didn't know how to. I could see in the times of my life when I unwittingly aligned with the purpose that was living me and how successful my life became. And the other times when I wasn't and how crappy my life became. I began to see that there was a way to live aligned with this purpose. So that awakening was the beginning. It was one evening, lasted for, 3-4 hours. Woke up next morning feeling great. Week later, had another event. And next weekend after that, another event. And another event. And it never stopped. So ever since that time, this consciousness is simply constantly available, constantly living me. I'm just negotiating so I can come out and talk to you. It's constantly there. And it's my recognition that what has happened to this person, is the potential that we all carry. And where we are in that potentiality, we each have to find out. No guarantees, but there is this being able to move in the direction of enhancing that inherent potential with you, or moving in the direction sideways, or moving in the opposite direction. We actually have a say. And from the moment of awakening, we discover that we can begin to choose the direction of our life in a way that we never could choose, driven by our ego, fear, need, desire, craving, repulsion, attraction, preferences, habit. This freedom carries with it a power, a clarity, a capacity and resolve to actually change the fundamental orientation of your life. And that is what I teach. And that is what, in all my work with people that came years later when I started teaching, is what I do. It's my experience that any small movement of any sort, aligned with the truth of this purpose that is living us, it never goes away. It might get veiled. It may be sidetracked by other things that we're still working out. But each piece, each time we choose to live aligned with this inherent potential within all of us, we start accumulating, we start shifting, you might say, the basis of our consciousness, coming up the frequencies, out of a structure that the bottom was always shame or apathy, to a place where we can come to acceptance, letting go, courage, freedom, so that we don't fall as far. We are able to stay truer. Our actions are more effective. We find a more effective relationship with existence. I call it Dharma. So, Sanskrit word for Dharma is those actions that are aligned essentially with your innate nature. That means when you take actions aligned with the potential, that's what the innate nature is. Each of us carry a potential. When you take actions aligned with your potential, with your Dharma, there is a sense of greater connections, greater clarity, greater confirmation that brings you out of the issue of self-esteem, out of the issue of the compensating structures that we bring on into our life. We come into a more true relationship with existence. And when we don't, we experience a diminishment, a loss of purpose, a loss of energy, a loss of clarity, a loss of resolve, and greater self-doubt and greater confusion. So this nature of being able to align ourselves with that innate potential is aligning ourselves with our purpose. And it is unique for each of us. So after an awakening process that went on for a few months, I linked up with a teacher in India, Indian teacher, who came to the United States actually 45 minutes from my house every couple of years. So I actually ended up connecting with him. And when I connected with him, I recognized automatically, just this once, immediately, that this is what a guru is. He was a recognition that he was manifesting the quality I felt was coming to me, but had not yet come to me. And he agreed that to take me to India with him, and I went there for 6 years, coming back periodically. In 2004, 6 years after I'd been there, he then sent me back to the United States to open a center in Sacramento, California, and that's pretty much where I began to start the work. Meanwhile, Satsang was holding the fort. Now, I want to go a little bit more on that, because why is she sitting up in front of the room, right? This lady is sitting up in front of the room. She's been with me for 32, 33 years now.
Right.
We haven't yet. We were husband and wife before this happened. Now, in a spiritual partnership, she takes care of all the functions that have to do with me showing up in a place like here. And I take care of all the functions of showing up here. And I'm really good at showing up on any here that I run across. So I'm really good at that part. And she's really good at her part. So from the very beginning, when my awakening happened and I went upstairs into our bedroom, while I was still in the process, she sat right up in bed. It had been late at night. Tears were pouring down her face. Tears were pouring down my face. And she says, "What's happening? What's happening?" And it was in that moment that I could recognize that no matter what our relationship was, she could recognize what had come to me. And she wasn't the only person in my life who could recognize it. My brother younger brother could recognize it. There were
Yeah,
other people
He
who,
drove up 2 days later.
yes,
He's never
they
left.
knew it, and I didn't know how they knew it. It was just a surprise to me. And then my mother showed up one day too, right in the early days. And it was this whole process of kind of like a revolution in my personal family structure that occurred. And this often happens to people, but perhaps not as dramatically. But when she met Sri Atmananda, who was his name, when he came to the United States 9 months later, he was walking off the airplane and she fell to her knees and began to experience alternate reality. And he recognized who she was right off the bat. He said, "This is my daughter from a past life. And she's obviously with you for a purpose." And then I told her that you have a role to play. You're to hold the base while I take him on the journey he has to travel. And when he's ready, you two will manifest together, which actually didn't start until around 2013. So from 1998 to 2013, she was playing a support structure in both our material base and also in the base of this organization, New Dharma, which was founded in 2009. She's here with me now because she's in transition.
I usually speak for myself, but tonight I can't.
Yeah.
Just like, So that's why he's speaking for me. Just if anyone knows, he does not usually speak for me.
Yeah.
But today I'm just having a little bit of a difficult time. So the energy sometimes just comes in.
So she's my energy sink. She pretty much takes the energy that comes in when I'm in a room and goes to her. She has a hard time staying what we would call conscious when this is happening. There's other people in the room that help me hold the space, but she holds that unique role. What it does for me is allows me to continue to interact with you, allows me to stay functional, allow me to continue to be articulate, to answer your questions, and to be with you individually. So just wanted to be clear on that. She herself is going through her own transition, and which is, I feel, in getting near to the point where she will be able to, she has already been facilitating groups and will at some point be able to take this further. She has her own wisdom and her own lessons to share. So he initiated us together along with my brother, and my mother came and what do they call it when they crash the party? My mother showed up to crash the party because she wanted to know who this guy was, because a total of three of my brothers were drawn to this simultaneously. She had come up to this little ashram that my teacher would come to every couple of years while I was there, knocked on the door where I was staying, and I popped out of a meditation where I could hardly stand. I came out and there was Mom. "Oh, Mom, hi. How did you find me?" And she says, "I'm here to find out what's happening to my sons." "Oh, okay, so you should go over to the main house." And I went back to meditation. About an hour later, I came out. I can function now. And I go out and I'm looking for her. And she's sitting in this sort of common gathering house, sitting in a chair in the living room. Tears are pouring down her face. She's saying, "This is heaven. This is heaven." So there was a recognition in my karmic world that showed up simultaneously with my awakening that brought along with it a certain degree of baggage, right? Most people aren't so lucky. Usually what happens is our baggage pulls us back. Doesn't all support the unfolding of our awakening. It actually looks to put out the awakening, to cover over the awakening. So I have, in my experience, there's not many people who have had that fortunate circumstances. The Bhagavad Gita talks about this in the 6th chapter of a yogi who doesn't complete the journey in a past life and then is able to take it up again in another life in more favorable circumstances. So that was clearly what was my case, and probably some of you in the room. Okay, so much has happened since. We're now traveling all over the world. We do programs all over the world. We have a website. I have thousands of recordings and videos. Some of you already know how to access them. Many of them are free. We're doing a silent weekend starting this Friday night for the weekend, which will be the program here that will complete this tour. And we do these all over the country and in Europe and in India. So we're a pretty busy couple of people, as are the people who are supporting us in this process. Okay, so now I'm going to bring us back to the 4 questions. Because the relevancy of these 4 questions, it's my experience that one of the ways we can align ourselves with the awakening is to apply our intelligence into a query of the nature of what has happened to us and how to move into alignment with that. So the 4 questions are, who am I? Why am I here? And you can put a negative in there, like, why in the hell am I here? What is the purpose of life? And the most important one, how do I live? Because if we engage our intelligence, it's my experience that no matter what your spiritual awakening has been, if it's been in your awareness or in your experience, if it's love or truth, it'll all come down with you aligning your life with what has come to you. And these 4 questions I see are pivotal, because otherwise we slip back into the superficial habit of our who, of our personality, of our requirements of our life, and the clinging and petty resentments and strategies for compensating or living or getting what we want and avoiding what we don't want. So in that shallow domain, we slowly veil the awakening. Yes, it cannot go away, but we can veil it. If we're not keeping up a practice that keeps refreshing it, like meditation or self-inquiry, this would be an example of self-inquiry, then it will fade inevitably, because we're waking up out of the mud. And if we don't keep waking up, what do? We go back into the mud. You may be awake in the mud, and what it feels like to be awake when you slip back into your old self is miserable. Because where before there were good days and bad days, but in an awakened state, it's like all days are diminished. Good days and bad days lose their charm. They lose their pain. They lose, both components fall away. And we end up in this kind of quagmire where we don't know which way to go or what's true or not true. Many, many awakenings do not establish themselves when they first come. If you haven't aligned yourself with a teacher and been able to stay the course, or you haven't recognized what the nature of the awakening is and not run to your psychiatrist or your therapist or your whatever your current addiction is for feeling better, then you're going to lose track. You're not going to be able to hold on to what has come. That's just the truth. So what we have in this age, in these years since World War II, is we have had the greatest flowering of education, the greatest flowering of awareness, awakening of consciousness, in terms of being able to become aware of itself as part of a greater whole. We are an incredible worldwide awareness now in every part of the world. I travel to India every year. I travel to every part of the country. Everybody's aware the same way we're aware of what's going on in any one piece of the world. Even if they're a farmer in India, they got a smartphone. They got something that allows them to connect with the fact there's other parts of the world that's quite different than what they had been living on their entire lives up to this last decade, perhaps in India, or 2 decades. So there's a revolution in terms of what we would call the body of information that's available to mankind. There's been a revolution in terms of education worldwide. There has been a revolution in terms of the physical sciences being able to address people's health and well-being, and how countries can begin to cooperate with each other and rather than just kill each other off. There's been this greater discrimination in terms of, you might say, the world is waking up with the possibility of aligning with what we would call the planet's dharma, the opportunity of mankind, something that can express that inherent potential that lies within all of humanity. And that's why it's as prosperous for so many of the people in the world as it is now. That's why so many people have greater health. It's also why so many people are pissed off when things aren't aligned. Now, there's both sides of this awakening. If there isn't been an awakening in the consciousness, like I am speaking spiritual awakening, then what there is, you become more aware of the problem. And the tendency is to blame others. So there's a mixed bag here in this unfolding of the collective consciousness. As a matter of fact, the correct word for it is apocalypse. In the Greek, apocalypse means revealing what's hidden. So we're in a process of revealing what's hidden. So therefore, in many ways, the apocalypse has come. But it would be the apocalypse that opens up an opportunity for mankind. And I believe, despite what it looks like right now, that is exactly what's happening. What's being revealed is what's in the way for that potential for mankind to manifest itself. It looks exactly the same with people on the spiritual path. Things, all the things that you haven't met, that you are not conscious of, that you're still asleep to, come up to show themselves to you. And so it can become like, how can I possibly be on the spiritual path? I'm worse than I was before my awakening. I can't get along with people. I'm repulsed by everybody. I'm reactive and judging and all over the place because that previously was hidden. It is now coming up into the light of your consciousness. And by the way, it's not just your intellectual consciousness. It's your whole body. It's your emotional nature. It's your motives and drives. A virtual vehicle that we are is actually much more expansive than what we can experience just through our minds, just through our awareness, our human awareness. So this event of discovering what's hidden in you can be quite physically painful, emotionally painful, mentally confusing, obscuring, and difficult. And congratulations, that means you're awakened. I always like to say, no self-respecting ego would seek out an awakening. Because there's one thing about ignorance, is ignorance can be bliss. Because the nature of ignorance, you don't know you're suffering. So the nature of, let's see, I'm going to bring it back to where I'm going on this. So the Bhagavad Gita, by the way, is a book I use. My teacher used the Bhagavad Gita. We have, he did a translation. He's Indian and came from a Brahmin family, and he has his own unique translation of the Bhagavad Gita. This is the book. It's a little blue book. You can buy it on Amazon. $3, I think. Download it on your Kindle. And basically, for him, all he did was chant this book. He chanted it continuously. And he traveled through India, abandoning his children, his wife, and his lucrative job with Maharishi Yogi. He was his chief financial controller for 5 years. When he had this prompting, he shares the story of when he decided he was going to leave, he told his wife that he put an ad in the paper saying that all the furniture in their house, all their belongings in their house were free to anyone who wanted to come on Sunday. And then he disappeared for 7 years. So he was a radical version, almost, yes, definitely as radical, if not more radical than me. But while he was in this period of transition, where he had left it all behind, he was chanting the Gita continuously. He had learned as a young man, and that's all he did, was chant the entire 18 chapters. Took about 2 hours. And that's what he did. And about 5 years before my awakening, he had a similar awakening. And when the awakening happened for him, it was Krishna visited him. And he was, of course, obviously very connected to the mantra and the rest of it. And Krishna revealed to him that this book is actually a map. That's not just a story between an Arjuna and a Krishna. It's not just a mythical tale of a great battle that was between good and bad. It was a a description, when you could enter into it correctly, of the stages of the journey, the return journey. Other parts on which the Gita is derived describes the entire journey, but this was the return journey that each of us goes through stages on the journey. In India, when he began to reveal his interpretation of the Gita, it took me about a half a year. I began to open up to it. I realized that it was exactly describing what had happened to me. And that there were parts of the Gita when I first went to India that I didn't recognize. I didn't know what that was pointing to. That months or years later, it became apparent. I then saw, oh, the Gita was pointing to me to what was coming next. I didn't even know that was possible. So I take this teaching and I've interpreted it in all my work in such a way that you can begin to find, using your intelligence, a measurable way of defining where you are in the journey. So these teachings, my revelation of the Gita is on the website for free. It's 22 videos or audio recordings as well as transcriptions, and we hope to publish the first 6 chapters within a few weeks as a book. So that brings us to these 4 questions. The first question is, who am I? Is that existential question, the fundamental existential question. That actually isn't just a who. It's trying to make a distinction between who you are and what you are. Who am I has to also include the who we are. I have this name and this personality, and these are things I like, and this is what I'm good at, and this is what I'm not good at. This is what I hate. This is what I love. This is my behavior. This is my story. And then in that process, be able to create a distinction between that and that which can evaluate what the who is, that which can actually see the story running, that which can catch yourself in the process of being a who. Of course, none of these questions become particularly powerful until you awaken, because these questions are for one who has awakened in one form or another in order for it to reap its fruit. Because what you're coming down to is something really essential. When I did the revelation of this first question up in Boston, it started with that you know you exist. Anyone in the room who isn't existing, please raise your hand. This is like a question anybody can answer because it's a self-evident truth. Your existence is an indisputable fact. No matter how miserable or how great or how neutral, that is a truth that you need no evidence for. Self-evident. That starts pointing to an essential quality of what we are that needs no proof. Doesn't care, doesn't demand, doesn't expect to find evidence for your existence. Although certainly the miserable human ego may question its existence, mostly because it doesn't prefer the one it's in. But it doesn't dispute that you're just a miserable existence, rather than the one you would rather have. So we're looking actually, because this is my experience, the nature of what you're seeking is already here. There's nothing you need to do but discover what you already are. And I like to use the example of Newton and the apple, right? For Newton, he's sitting there leaning against a tree, so the story is, and an apple falls. And he was obviously in a contemplative state of consciousness because he said, how come it goes down? How come it falls? He knew something about space and planets, and he knew there was no up or down or right or left or forward and back. How come it goes down? So what he did is he started an inquiry into the fact that apples fall. Very comparable. to revealing something that's already here that we take for granted, that we can't see because it's the ubiquitous part of life that pervades everything. And you can't recognize it because you don't have a place of making that distinction. Like me, I constantly forget or misplace things. And almost 70% of the time, they're right in front of me. And what I have to do is I have to call Satsang into the room and say, I can't find my slippers. She walks into the room and suddenly my slippers appear because it is so ubiquitous that I can't see it. Well, you might say that's what a guru is. The nature of a spiritual teacher is that it brings a light to us that allows us to see things that we weren't able to see before because we're habituated to seeing life in a certain way. So these are what I'm saying, self-evident truths that we're not seeing. So when you begin to discover, okay, who am I? You very quickly become, what am I? Okay, I'm this story, I'm this belief, I'm this mood, I'm this idea, I'm this body, I'm this history. And what knows that? What is able to determine there is a who? It can't be the who. It's got to be something other than the who, or maybe it's another version of the who initially. But that's why awakening is important, because then you recognize, no, because when you see the who, you have a moment of expansion. When you see yourself in this true inquiry, you see the self-evident truth that you hadn't been seeing before, and you go, aha. You go, yes, I got it. It's revelatory, and it has an impact on your system. So the power of this question has to do with a way of mobilizing your awakening to begin to dismantle in a visceral way what is still binding you into the habit of who you are. And every time you do, what you are is strengthened. Every time you see a piece of the what that's been invested in the who, it gets released. It becomes free. And that's what gives you the brighter light. That's what gives you the sense of connection. That's what gives you the aha. Aha is like ah. It's like taking a deeper breath. It's like a cool breeze on a hot day. It's a ah. That's the nature of the unfolding of your awakened self from that embedded error habit of you. And then we look at the next thing is, why am I here? And then you could put another statement, why in the hell am I here? Who did this to me? But it is also the question of why you are here is a question you start asking. One of the ways you can ask is, why is this showing up? What is my role in what's arising right now? Why am I here with this person? Why am I here with this problem? Why am I here with this issue? What is it here that's actually true that right now I can't yet access or see or sense? So what happens in that inquiry, you could say it another way. You could say it like a prayer. Please show me why this is showing up. Please reveal to me the purpose for this rising in my life. When you have awakened, you actually have access to forces greater than an ordinary human being. We just need to call upon them. We just need to use that capacity to ask for help, to be willing also to receive the help. Many people ask for help but aren't willing to hear it. I tell people, don't ask me a question unless you're willing to accept the answer. It is literally the whole orientation of why is this showing? We tend to retreat into our habitual way because I'm a bad person, because I'm stupid, or they're bad, they're stupid. You know, it's this whole way of habitual way of interpreting what's arising. We have to have another paradigm that has something to do with our oneness, has something to do with the purpose of life, has something to do with the potential that's arising in me and my longing and motive, aspiration to make that more real for me. Then from that space, that question becomes, again, another powerful means of entering into, in a lived way, as part of your daily practice, not just meditation, not just reading beautiful spiritual books, not just making plans for the next retreat or visit onto the website for spiritual entertainment, but rather an inquiry into what is arising here right now. What is true right now? What is self-evident right now? How is it that this is showing up? And tonight, we're expanding this a bit, because the first two questions are really about you initially, about where you're still not able to see the self-evident. This next question is about you tapping into what is the purpose of life. There's an inherent relationship between all these. Inherent relationship to what is the purpose of life and why am I here and who am I? It's all leading to the fourth question, which is, how do I live? Because this inquiry includes all these three questions, each supporting the other, as we begin to discover how to move in life with this intentional orientation, like a paradigm. You hold a paradigm. What is a paradigm? It's a space in which something can arise. For example, you could say, I have a paradigm to end hunger on the planet. Right? You have that paradigm. Then things that arise, what you'll discover is what helps and what is opposed to that paradigm manifesting itself. Sending a rocket to the moon. The first thing that rose up was all the problems with getting a rocket on the moon. And that's how you get a rocket on the moon, is by meeting all the things that are in the way to doing so. So the paradigm of the question is, what is the purpose of life? In another sense, you could say, what is life asking of me at this moment? That was the second question. But another sense is, what is the alignment of my own individual unfolding with the whole unfolding that all of us, all of life is going through? This question opens us up into the nature of the self-evident truth that allows you to, in your newly awakened consciousness, move into alignment with a quality of consciousness that's even greater than human. Or you might say, includes more of humanity, or includes more truth, or includes more love. Because it will bring with it a natural compassion, a natural motivation will arise out of this when you can begin to tap into the essential truth of what's happening. For example, you can read the news of what's going on in the world right now. And you can go and say, oh, it's doom and gloom and it's just going to go this way, or this is great. I really like this breaking up the old structures and dissolving the old paradigms. You could take either attitude into that. But what allows us to be in a more effective relationship with that is that which would ask the question, what is the purpose of life that right now this is arising? And you'll begin to find that the same way it was for you in your own inquiry, why is this shit happening to me? I'm a good person. I'm doing my meditations. How come it's so crappy right now? So you'll begin to discover that's how it is in the whole question that's occurring in life. Why is it getting worse right now? Well, if you remember, it was better earlier. And once you start opening up to that question, you'll begin to discover that just like you, life cycles. Humanity cycles. Periods of darkness and light, darkness and light. Consciousness ebbs and flows like waves on an ocean. And what happens is it gives us a perspective. We begin to step back from the way we would normally interpret it and say, okay, there is a purpose. It may not be clear where this is going, but there is a instrumental, intelligent forces, maybe not a singular. Matter of fact, it's many, many, many beings and forces exist in the subtle worlds that are guiding humanity. And they're here for humanity. They're using this whole solar system as an experimental lab. They're here, and I saw that, by the way, in my first moment of awakening, that there are forces and beings that are here specifically for each of us. First for humanity, then for the United States or Sweden or India, then for your family structure, and then for you. And they're seeking to assist you in whatever way you can open to it, to come into alignment with this possibility, opportunity, because it is my experience that the only way the universe can fulfill itself is through each of us. No other way. There's no way the ocean can be other than the all-pervading infinite ocean until it falls, it evaporates, comes out of the clouds, falls into the dirt and the soil, and gets directed into channels and becomes rivers, streams and rivers, lakes and ponds. Then the ocean begins to experience itself through the limits, through the boundaries of that which is not ocean. So we are actually being held in a purposeful context. When this becomes self-evident, all fear dissolves. The inherent neediness, wanting, ambition that comes out of fear or lack fades away. You find that you can relax, that it's not about you being good or bad or right or wrong, both at the individual level or at the universal level, but that there's an unfolding. You could say a working out of the inherent possibilities and the resistance and obstacles that we've accumulated as a species since, 200 million years ago, we came on the planet and started screwing things up. I call it the collective error. And then we're all carrying a piece of the collective error through our parents and their parents and their parents. So we're actually here to work out that collective error. And when we begin to step out of our self-absorbed individual focus, we begin to recognize more and more freedom, more and more capacity to meet the difficulties and challenge, more and more a sense of connection and fullness in our lives. So the purpose clearly becomes something that's living you. You can find your own individual stream of it, but then you can see the individual stream motivating other people. When you step out of this inquiry for just yourself and why you're here and who you are, you begin to see the stream of other people because you start universalizing. You start coming out of the narrow perspective, I'm here for me only. That's what ego says. That's what who says. I have to do it myself. I have to do it my way. I can't trust anybody else. That's what ego says. But when we step into the larger inquiry, then we can see that everyone is instruments. They're instruments or channels that are coming to us actually as instruments or channels of the universe to show us what's left, what's still hidden, what we can't still love, what we can't still accept, what we can't still be in relationship with, where we sell out or give out the truth of our own authority, of the truth of what we've able to learn in the story of our own life. So you don't have to understand this conversation, by the way. I'm basically creating a pathway in your consciousness. We're creating a pathway to the extent that you're listening that will allow for something to open up in you that's already open, but it will give it channels by which it can unfold. For example, these 4 talks will be available, I believe, for anyone who came to any one of these, correct? So you can actually hear the first conversation, the first 2 in Boston, and this one and tomorrow, even if tonight's the only night you go. And I'm finding that this is the way that my work is happening because it's basically like a trellis for a vine. It's giving a scaffolding for the awakened consciousness to grow up into. And I would do this for free if it was possible in the West to do anything like I'm doing for free. It would be, but it takes this scaffolding in order to create our ability to move into alignment with an inherent possibility that lives with every single one of us. Now, there's no guarantee that this possibility will be able to manifest this lifetime fully, but if you can just receive this transmission to whatever extent you can, that possibility, that potentiality will begin to be able to start finding a way into your life, your teacher, your path, your focus. It'll be unique to each of you, not Satri or these teachings per se, maybe for some of you, but it will become an augmentation. I like to say like a miracle grow for the vine. It gives an enhancement to whatever you have made important that in fact is important, that in fact is true, that in fact will take you to that place in that most secret heart of you long for or aspire for. Okay. Life is purposeful. It's up to something. Our awakenings isn't just for our individual enjoyment, in fact. It's not just that you become awakened, although that is definitely, you have to have somebody in the room who's functional. So we start with awakening, but the journey actually begins with awakening. And what is the journey? It's to continue to awaken the asleep parts of ourselves, to continue to awaken to that which is not awakened. If we continue to engage in that inquiry of awakening ourselves, then we will come to the place where we can become useful to others, where we can actually assist them in awakening in their own journey, just sometimes by our very presence, sometimes just by our naturalness, just by our authenticity, sometimes by our irritation or anger, or our finally getting sick of a behavior of someone in our life and calling them on it. We become instruments or channels for changing the world without us actually maybe being fully conscious of it. That being fully conscious of it doesn't come until later. And maybe for some, it's never necessary. But the nature of the awakened state is the one thing you, once it comes, you know as a self-existent truth is the most fulfilled condition of your existence. That moment of awakening, that moment of breaking out from the slumber, of coming out of the veil, of the shroud, of the habit of you, is what we live for. No matter what the dimension that we're operating in. I had a guy, was it the second talk, share about gambling.
The first talk.
And he said he hadn't been able to kick it, and he hasn't been able to kick it because it feels so good. It feels so good to win. It feels so good to be right. And I said, good, that's great. You should gamble. Because for him right then, in his paradigm, I mean, he's an awakened being. He's been to my other talks. He's 82 or whatever he is. Could barely walk to the chair in front of the room. But when I said, you should know that of the 5 Pandava brothers in the Bhagavad Gita, on the good side, the oldest was a gambler. And he's the one who lost the kingdom for the whole tribe, which caused the war, which killed 16 million people. So gambling has a role to play, obviously. And when I told that to him, he jumped in the chair about a foot. It's like, huh? And when I told him, then you should gamble. It'll probably add 10 years to your life. And the more you can be in the body, the more you're going to get out of this life. And he jumped in his chair. I said, you may not be able to walk to the chair, but you need a seatbelt when you get here. So it is the quality of consciousness that comes to us when we're able to come to the right relationship with the moment, where we can get out of our story of limitation or wrong or right in a way that's true. True is not necessarily wrong or right. You don't know until it shows up. You discover it in your own experience. Okay. All right. So there you go. That's the nature of tonight's inquiry. Okay, so how it works from this point is your chance to interact with me. Okay? We have a chair and a microphone. And you can come up and bring forward a question, bring forward where you are, bring forward an objection, whatever is acceptable. But you're probably not going to get what you thought you were going to get. But if you come to the chair, what you'll be demonstrating will be what I'm talking about. It will be an opportunity for you to step out. What is courage? Right? Courage is stepping out of the habit of our smaller self. It's the ability to risk without any guarantee of an outcome. In fact, it's an act of faith. Even though it doesn't mean, how can I come up? I don't have a question. I don't have a thought in my head. How can I come up and ask a question? I wouldn't know why I should come up. But coming up without knowing what you would do would have a greater courage quota to it than if you knew what you were going to talk about. And that's what matters. That's what matters. Yeah, you feel the juice already? Huh? Now there's addicts to juice, so no problem for Anita. But I'm going to give some of other of you where this is the opportunity to come forward. All right, come forward. And when you come forward, just say your name. That's all we need, your first name. Yeah. Have a seat.
I'm Elliot. Now everybody was always pranaming, so I pranam.
Well, pranam. If you can know, if you could connect to that principle, then all you're looking at is yourself.
Pranam to Brahmananda.
So Ellie, it's been what, third time?
What's it?
How many times have I seen you? 3, 4 times.
In India.
India.
Several times in India.
Uh-huh.
We had an interview.
Yeah.
I did a Pumpkin Hollow retreat.
Yeah.
With you. Did a lot of remote retreats.
Okay.
3, 9 days. Anyway, did a lot of stuff.
Okay. All right.
Been following on Crowdcast.
Okay. Well, give me your hand. Hello.
Hello.
Once again. All right. What's there?
So yeah. So I'm a mixture of, I have no idea why I'm here, and I have some idea why I'm here.
All right. You've had practice, that's why.
It seems like this is a major transition point, but there still seems to be some. Well, 2 years ago, you told me that there was a ceiling on my head, and thinking about it, I suspected it was this Rajasic impulse, which is holding back the surrender.
Yeah, the thinking mind, the endless thinking. So how's that going?
Better.
Better. That means less.
Less. Yeah.
The less thoughts, the happier we are.
Yes. So there still seems to be a lot of uncertainty.
Okay. It's good you used the right words. Seems to be a lot of uncertainty. So, right? That's kind of first a contradiction. Seems and certainty. So the uncertainty seems to fit in with the seems. So the seems to be uncertainty is a lessening of that seeming to be certain. Another way of saying it, I seem to be more certain. So what is the nature of that arising certainty has something to do with the nature of the reality of what you are. It brings with it, you might say it feels like self-confidence. It feels like less confusion, less fear, less uncertainty. But it's really what I like to say, it's a grounding in ourselves, in our self-existent truth. When you become aware of the self-evident truths within ourselves, we care less about what others think of us. We care less about if our behavior is a certain way or how it's perceived. We have a greater freedom to be, even if we don't have a particular thought structure associated with it. So their life becomes better. An uncertain life is one way of measuring misery, where a certain life may not necessarily measure happiness or not happiness, but it's less miserable. So I just wanted to stay with this because it's just the words we say are actually saying a lot of what actually is now happening to you, what's going on. Because I can see it too. You haven't gotten to the whole story of it, but I can also see the difference.
You see it. I don't need to tell the story.
No, you don't do, but they might be interested, and they might be interested. So.
Oh, okay. Let's see.
Seems to be less uncertainty.
Well, there have been a lot of emotional releases.
Okay.
Last few years, very intense. And I wanted to mention or ask you about, and it seems to be lessening, these continuous regrets that come up. They can be major or they can be superficial. They could be 50 years ago. They could be 1 year ago, but they don't seem to repeat, but they seem to barrage the consciousness.
And what happens for you when that happens?
I can kind of contract.
You contract. Is there sorrow? Is there guilt? Is there blame, shame? What's in there?
Yeah, I think I blame myself.
Okay, so there is a blaming, which, by the way, is self-shaming. So it's a blame and shame. And this is, of course, ego's favorite activity. It's its favorite activity to guilt ourselves, to feel remorse for something that is not true or is only due to a perspective that's limited. That whole negative conversation about our past, our ruminations, our shames, our diminishment, our unworthiness is the way the ego keeps preventing us from waking up to the full scope of what we are, because these are just parts of our who. This is just part of the mind. It is just part of the emotional nature that still uses memory, that still is attached to having something a certain way versus another way, or having lose something, or not behaved in a way that we set our bar for ourselves, which may have been set by other people. But whatever that may be is self-critical structure, has a role to play. And the role to play isn't what's apparent. It's not just about diminishing ourselves or our self-worth. It's to keep us in a state of irresponsibility. Keep us in a state where we don't have to change, where we can stay like a child. I can't help myself. And we keep feeding the negative story about our worth, and we lose access to that quality of consciousness that comes when we wake up, when we know who we are. So this is the residue, Ellie, and it probably comes in part because your system has got more tamas than you need. So the tamas has us be more inclined to be attached to the past, to hold on to the stories. I mean, right? Many people love stories, or hold on to the sentimental parts of ourselves and the people who lived in life. The part of us that looks back with rosy glasses and forward with, dark glasses. A part that is uncertain of the future and is clinging to the past. So that component is something you're going to have to recognize, that this is what's arising rather than believe it. So your ability to notice this pattern coming up in you, the best way to deal with it is convert it into an experience in your body. So, for example, shaming or self-blame or remorse. Like What's a good one? Remorse a good one for you? What's the one of
Those
this?
three,
They're all good.
remorse and blame.
Okay. Blame to others or blame? Be you blaming yourself?
Blame
Okay.
myself.
So let's not use the blaming of others. Let's do the remorse. Use the remorse. So I want you to, right now, be aware of, just bring up the word remorse and let that just rise up in you, whatever that might be. And what you're doing is you're looking for where the remorse resides in your body. And when you have, put your hand there and you find it.
My head, also in my chest.
Okay. Definitely the head. The head, of course, is the source of the problem. Now I want you to pay attention to your chest. Okay, so put your hand on your chest. And I want you to see if you can poke around, poke down lower, poke down higher, keep poking around until you find where does remorse, like a Geiger counter, where does the remorse really live? Okay, put pressure on that point. Like push pressure on it. Okay, and see what happens when you put pressure on that point. Do you notice anything change in your body, in your throat, in your shoulders, throat, okay?
Breathing's heavy.
Breathing's heavy. Is there another word besides remorse that comes up for you? Like sadness or sorrow?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Okay, good. Stay with the sorry. The sorry. All right, now take the I'm out of it and just say, feel the sorrow. Yes. And see if something else moves in your body or if another word arises. Or see if another word arises and where it is in your body. So sorrow. Poke deeper. Poke down towards lonely. Okay, that's like the consequence of sorrow. So it's a little higher. I think we need to also go deeper. Lonely is interpretive. Sorrow is immediate. Being able to tell the difference. Lonely will lead to sorrow. So poke around, see if you can feel it in your body. By the way, it may not be these words for you. So,
Hurt.
hurt. Start feeling into that part. Put your hand there. All right, because I can feel it. Just start pushing.
That's the dark forces.
Yeah. It's not dark forces. This is just deeper sorrow. Yeah. It could be self-hate. It could be any kind of thing can exist here. My experience is this point is where it's an issue. We go from our power to our unworthiness, where we are low self-esteem. And in there is a tangle of anger, resentment, grief, sorrow, loss. So when you're looking if you follow this instruction and you're looking into your body, you'll find that this is a rich trove of darkness, that it will release experientially into your body in this kind of inquiry, because you're in experiencing of the sorrow, the I'm sorry, or the remorse. You're entering into it at its root. The body is the root of the habits that keep rising up. So the issue here is deep. Why does sorrow or remorse stay? What is it that keeps sorrow, remorse keep arising? Anger and resentment. Hatred. Something else in us that has not been met. Something that would be dangerous, perhaps in the moment where the sorrow arose. A part of ourselves, the issues of being able to penetrate into what's hidden in our body, is we have to put aside all the usual standards of what that might be. Deal with what arises in the most experiential term you can find for yourself. Instead of I'm sorry, which is a statement, to sorrow, for example. Okay, so here's what will happen with this Ellie, is that this regret, remorse pattern that keeps coming up is coming up from that place in your body. So when you meditate, or when this comes up again, stop what you're doing. Become aware of the sorrow or the remorse. Find its location. You started from up here. Yes, you have a story of I'm alone, story of forgetting the loss of someone, or the loss of love, or the loss of support. But stay in the direct immediacy, the most immediate term you can find to describe kind of the core part of it. So, your nature is feeling. Feeling, your emotional feeling nature, a strong, vital. Even though your head is strong, you're pretty much managing a strong, emotional, emotive, feeling, vital. Yeah. And it's neglected because you've been interpreting life from up here, not down here. So take the center of your consciousness and start entering it into the deeper into your body, literally. You're awakened and you're linked with me. You have a lot of force coming through your system. You just put your consciousness and you start moving it down into this part of your body, you're going to start seeing, feeling things coming up that were hidden before. Don't be afraid of what comes up. Don't go into the story that might be associated with what comes up. I mean, it's fine that afterward you can recollect what happened and how it's linked to your life and where the circumstance. Because what will happen is your dreams will become avenues by the unfolding of what's hidden there in you. And you'll have moments of the day where something will come up that will be a replication of the situation that set you up for your remorse or your guilt or your shame. And you can catch it when it arises. When you can catch an old pattern when it arises, it can't add another layer of error on you. If you can catch a structure in you where you want something and you're afraid of it at the same time, you can begin to reveal that whole knot in your lived life. So, okay. All right, so you have a big question mark right there. So, how are you doing? How are you doing? Yes.
I'm okay. I've got a lot of homework to do. I want to hear. I want to go to the video.
Yes. Listen to this again. And, we have coaching, online coaching, and you can go on the website and sign up with one of the people there, and they can assist you in clarifying this in your own experience. And because it's part of my teaching modality is being able to work in your body. When you have a repetitive pattern that keeps coming up, it has much more visceral reality over how you experience and perceive life. And it gets very much in the way of your ability of your intellect to see clearly and to be able to operate in arenas where it's more likely to defend itself from than to try to inquire into. Okay. Good to see you again. Mm-hmm. Love is coming. Good. Welcome. Go say your name, and you need your microphone.
My name is Beth, and I'm kind of terrified, actually.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
so-
Proof of courage.
Yeah, I felt like nauseous.
Okay, real proof of courage.
So,
That's a good place to start, by the way.
Yeah.
Your nausea.
I'm never nauseous.
Ah, okay. So there's
It's a different.
it's a new doorway.
Yeah. So
Microphone. up.
So,
Yeah.
so I guess I just want to talk about my experience with you first,
Okay.
or maybe that's it. But, you know, I'm sitting there and I never sit in the front and I kind of sit further in the back. And,
So you're slowly creeping closer to the fire.
and I was following you and, you know, I had some of my own awakening experiences and I can relate to what you say. And then I just want I want to tell you not to talk anymore.
You get saturated.
Yeah.
Anybody else like that gets saturated? Raise your hand.
Yeah.
It's like,
Right. And
Yeah.
it's like, oh, now I'm like spaced out, too
Yeah,
much,
too much.
right?
Okay, I want to, just before you go on, a little bit about saturation. That's your vessel growing. That's your ability to hold the energy expanding. So and now it just doubled because you moved up to the front of the room. So you just stepped out of the part of you that was uncomfortable and stepped into the place where the expansion can break through the boundary that you're habituated to. That's why the nausea also came up. So when a vessel, that means our system, our body system at an energetic level, expands to the next level suddenly, the physical body experiences a consequence. Discomfort, pain, nausea, instability, lack of groundedness, spaciousness. Any of those are symptomatic. So this is how you grow. See, it's not just in our mind that we grow, not just our heart. It's also our body's ability to hold energy. Because what's happening is the whole universe, whole ocean wants to come into you. And you're only letting so much in. And every time it comes in and it tries to expand, you say, no, it's too uncomfortable. Or I can't think, I don't know what I'm going to do. Or, I'm having these experiences. I'm not comfortable with these experiences. And so you keep yourself contracted. So the art of being able, when you open to the bigger energies, is to be able to allow it to have its way for as long as you can. And there are things you can do. You can ground yourself. You can go for a walk. You can drink a cup of coffee. You can eat something. And you can quiet the intensity of it until you can learn to stretch without a tear. You become plastic enough. You become resilient enough that you're going to be able to continue then to expand. And that is like willing to receive the love and the grace and the wisdom and the truth that you're surrounded by, that it is you. It's only the habit of you, the contracted adaptation of the who you are, the habit of your life, the timidity, the carefulness, the set of rules about how to behave and not behave, that's preventing this from being more natural.
So this answers my question somewhat. And a couple years ago, I was in a beautiful place and I didn't have to worry about money because I had to hardly pay anything. And I was just fed by nature, which is so important to me. And I had been taking some antibiotics for Lyme that released the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I had these wonderful, non-judgmental connections,
Mhm.
right? And
Good.
just completely present and completely grounded. And there was none of this stuff that we're talking about now.
Oh,
It was just
yeah.
smooth and easy and more embodied than I've ever been.
Okay, so but you're talking in past tense. So
So-
I'm waiting.
So now I've moved here.
Moved
I-
here to Connecticut.
Well, I was in the northwest of Connecticut,
Oh, okay.
and now I moved here. I have to pay 5 times more
Mhm.
money. My practice is tanked.
Mhm.
All I want to do is I set myself up to do these things, but really, like but really, I just don't want to do them. I just want to go back to the northwest of Connecticut. And so I feel like, what does love want? What does my life want? It feels like
What is the purpose? Yes.
it feels like these things are good for me, but they're terrifying. And it feels like, is it damaging my central nervous system? And like both seem true. I want to go in a retreat, and then I want to take my work to the next level.
So let me, Beth, I'll describe to you what this is. This is the cycle of gunas. Are you familiar with my teachings? You've been following my teachings, right?
Yeah.
So the guna cycle is sattva, where we're lifted up into a higher state of consciousness. We move into, these are natural cycles, like the seasons, right? We all have seasons. So sattva is a energy level that brings us closer to beingness. And then there's rajas, which is more about doingness. And then there's tamas, which is most about having and collecting and retreating into a narrower and narrower and smaller, more pleasurable, reduced condition. Well, so we all go through it, like spring, summer, and fall. And this is the cycle. So all this that was happening with where you were was the sattva cycle. And the characteristic of the sattva cycle is, as it starts arcing, is it gets ambitious. It wants to take the new state that it's come to, the new happiness, the new freedom, and expand it, which is actually a true prompting, by the way. It's also that point where we move from sattva into rajas can be a launch point for a whole new spiritual possibility. But if we don't know what we're looking for, it'll be a rajas that takes us back into the world. We'll take it and we'll write it on a book, or we'll want a new teaching practice, or we'll take a new relationship, or we'll move to a new location, thinking that is the way to expand it. And inevitably, when we unwittingly do it based on the motivations of our past human nature, we end up diminishing the state of the sattva instead of expanding it. It's inevitable. And once you start running the arc of rajas, things get rougher. Their excitement's part of it. The sense of possibility, which by the way is also true, has a truth to it. But the challenges of meeting the next set of structures that have been able to be hidden while you're in your sattvic phase. By the way, these phases last for years. Okay? It start revealing themselves, and suddenly we are back into meeting structures that we had left behind the last time we were in the cycle. These are all useful in their own way, by the way, in the unfolding of who we are and discovering what we are. So it's not like a right or wrong, but it's an inevitable outcome. What is the best way to be what you're doing is to stay with the purpose that got you here, the motive, the purpose that was behind you, that had you move out of that lovely western side of the state and come into this new more challenging opportunity to manifest yourself, because that's what you were trying to do.
Right.
It's right there in the inherent purpose of life to manifest itself, to come into existence. Now, I should share that as part of this talk at some point, perhaps after you. So this was true. This is true. And the advantage of that is you're sitting in this chair right now asking this question, that this moment is a reflection of the truth of that purpose in terms of guiding you on your journey, not to just be whatever better therapist, better healer, but whatever it is you do for your work, but for you as a developing soul in your journey to the truth of what you are. So how do you take advantage of where you are is you keep choosing your choice, the previous choice. You keep taking the actions that are required to reestablish your practice, to find ways to reduce the overhead for your move, to augment your resources in a way that's effective. Either perhaps we worked in person, or yes.
Did you say reduce my practice or increase? I heard.
Yes.
Increase, like make it.
I think initially I don't know what I just said, so someone catches me on that, I go into presence and then everything's
Yeah, here.
gone.
What I heard you say was augment.
Augment, that's what I felt.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So,
You keep choosing what you've chosen, and then the lesson can be fully realized because all retreats are errors. All retreats are errors. You have to go forward in terms of the unfolding of the opportunity. What will change won't be your circumstances, won't be any of that. What will change is your orientation, your attitude. So maybe what will happen is this will be a complete failure, and you have no choice but to live in your car, and and then you'll be able to enjoy the gifts of strangers. And you'll begin to see that the universe is always trying to support me in coming into a relationship with existence that's not based on me doing something or having it a certain way. Okay, now that is a story. The feeling is an emotional component that's going in with the thought that's creating a story. And all you have to do is talk to a doctor and they will go into agreement with your story, or share it with somebody else that that's been their life strategy, and they'll go into agreement in your story. So the best thing to do is go into your body. Just go into the part of you in that moment, which is doubting or regretting with the choice that you made. So if you look right now and you're in this kind of tentative place of uncertainty, which is what the word Ellie used, is this vulnerability, this questioning, where is it in your body?
feeling is burning and shakiness and like a fraying of my central nervous system. I feel it.
Okay, so that's defining a little further, but you want to stay in the sensation, the heat, and where the sensation are. And that sensation will become, if you pay attention, and one of the ways to pay attention is just like put your finger on different parts of your body, knowing that the diaphragm is likely to carry a component of what it is that's arising in you that would be worth activating. So it could show it. Fear. Nausea was the other thing. You're right there on your stomach, right? Yeah. Okay. Now, what is fear? Take the word fear away and be with the sensation of what that is. And does it have affects other part of your body, like nausea would go to your throat, things like that.
I don't feel the nauseousness.
Okay. Put the microphone up.
I don't feel the nauseousness. I mean, the feeling I have, like in my arms, is just this breaking through, screaming, which goes
Good.
goes along.
Stand up and start breaking it. Go ahead and start jumping up. No, really. Go ahead. Do it. Jump. Just jump. Go. Hop, hop. More. That doesn't do it. Okay, you're 9 years old on the lawn. There's nobody around. Yeah, there we go. Okay, yeah, there we go. Get it out there. All right. Keep going. Move it. Yeah. Good. Got it. That was a lot of juice. Yeah, a little bigger, a little freer. Yeah, out of the box. Out of the box. All right, you want to go anywhere else with this one, dear? Oh, you're going back to your chair. Let's just make sure you're finished. Come here, I'll see you. Often it's that simple. Often it's as simple as letting the body.
It's so frustrating.
Now there's the other part.
So small.
Yes. Now that is true speaking.
That's what I feel. I feel so frustrated that I have to be so contained. And I'm just so fucking pissed off.
Got it. Good thing to be pissed off about.
Just like, so it's the arm thing.
Yeah. strangle whatever that is. Yeah, I know. You looked at me, so
Right?
maybe we should talk about men in your life.
But, like that feeling of being
Yeah.
overwhelmed, right?
Yes,
and
yes.
then feeling like you're ungrounded and I'm ungrounded and I hate that feeling and then blaming you,
Yeah.
But it's not that. I know that. It's just that.
Yeah, that's but you understand it is the visceralness of this that is the foundation of the error we end up living for the next 2 or 3 weeks or months or the rest of our lives. We need to move things out of that story-bound structure into this more immediacy, so that it can have we then can become present with what in you is still making you small. Because the smallness is a box we put ourselves into, usually unwittingly, to be safe, to do it right, to get what we want, so on and so forth. So what you have to do is discover you're doing this. So what you can do is just notice the part of you that's still programmed, that doesn't give you permission to be wild and woolly. That is still part of your childhood that's running in the background, that's getting in the way of the opportunity you sensed for coming here. The possibility. By the way, possibility is an expression of your system's ability to recognize what's next. Even if it comes from desire, it's likely to have lessons in there that maybe have to come again for us to truly get the fullness of what needs to be experienced. But we can get the lessons if we stay in touch with our body. This is, if you get anything out of this, because the body is closer to truth than the head. Head's as removed from the body as we can get. It is not going to give us any useful information except when we write our memoirs. So what we need to do is learn to get closer to wherever the gut is, wherever the core issues live in us, and be able to be in life from that place instead of this place. Then we can begin to be in a dynamic, immediate relationship with existence in each moment. So there's nothing wrong with your nervous system. You're plenty strong. The only thing you're doing is you're making it worse, but keeping the story running.
Yeah, I mean, I've been sick. This is the
Historically,
story,
right?
for a long time, and I've had to really. It was my wings were clipped,
Got it.
and it was really hard to live.
Now, careful. You're going into the story.
Anyway, I
Yeah.
love that you're here, and I was able to do this, and I
Okay.
believe you.
Okay, that's good. Good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and watch what happens. If not just the next few days, because there's something in you that's ready to manifest more fully. You're just going to have to meet newer challenges that you hadn't had to meet before. And of course, you're going to be uncertain because you're still going to be discovering. But if you be in the inquiry of what's the purpose for this? What in me is not able to move into relationship with this? And then what will happen is options will pop like popcorn. And you'll say, oh, I can do this. Oh, there's that. And so, or someone will call you, or, somebody looking for a roommate or a cheaper living situation. And, you look out in the room, seeing if there's any willing people. But that's how it works. We open ourselves up to the universe and let it start showing us what's next. Okay, my dear.
Thank you.
You bet.
Really, thank you.
Mhm. Okay. How are we doing time-wise? Okay, one more. Last chance. Oh, actually, we have tomorrow night. Cool. Hee hee. Come forward. You're a newbie. All right, good. Sometimes the less you know, the more likely you'll be courageous.
My name's Kin.
Kim?
Kin.
Kin.
So, in all that you were saying, I was listening, I think.
Mhm.
The thing that seemed not to feel right, and maybe it was when you were talking about, and it all comes from a collective error,
Mhm.
a collective mistake.
Mhm.
So, that put me in a feeling of, well, why is the source a collective mistake?
Okay, well, it's, and this is actually, if you don't mind, I'll go into being clear about the nature of the purpose of life, because this came as a revelation to me from the very beginning. It was a recognition of an absolute truth that my consciousness at the moment of awakening 20 years ago, I hadn't been able to hold. And it caused me to go unconscious. But later, I was able to see that I saw something that was outside of existence. I mean, my consciousness moved into relationship to something that was outside of existence. And years later, after many samadhis and processes and experiences, I began to realize that there is something, a principle that exists, you could say, before existence, a contradictory principle that exists before existence. You could say the potential for existence existed before existence. Okay, I mean, I know this sounds like a gimmick, but in fact, it's a concurrent contradiction. Existence, non-existence, our death and our birth, births and deaths, they're going on concurrently. We're the ones who put space between them. But in fact, deaths are occurring, births are occurring every single moment of existence. So that principle actually has a purpose. It's not like, it doesn't get articulate until it begins to manifest itself. So I'll just stay with this for a bit, and then I'll take it to where you are. And that is to be. That which is not yet existing has this inherent potential to exist. And it's that urge to exist, which in the Bible is the word of God. It's not that God said anything. It just went, and it came into existence. If there's doesn't sound so godly, but it is this urge to come into existence. And it's to be. And what's it to be? It wants to be in the becoming. It wants to be part of the possibility, not just the potentiality of becoming. And this is with what we are born. This is what creates evolution. This is what creates life. And each one of us wake up each day because of this inherent purpose of life. It's this will to be, to exist. Now it has other qualities because it carries inherent with it an intelligence. Inherent is an intelligence. And that intelligence is looking to learn how to be, learn how to exist, learn and grow, evolve. Inherent. It's all inherent in that potentiality. So existence, this entire world, all the physical dimensions, all the planes of physical and subtle consciousness are all expressions, very, very old expressions of this primal urge to be. So this is just like a way of describing how it is. It's what is happening, but it's that what I'm saying right now is just my way of languaging it to lead you into what this means, because this is not an abstraction. It is the thing that's living you. If you look at your own will to live, if your will to live gets threatened, what happens to you? Your whole system wakes up, right? If you become afraid of something, it's actually an awakening up, or you become excited with something, it's like a waking up. They're all coming from that same place, not caring if it's excitement or terror. It just wants to be, and it wants to exist in as many different ways that existence makes possible. And when you awaken on the spiritual path, you begin to discover not only that way to be in this existence, but in all the subtle worlds of existence. So what happens in that process is that it becomes more the quality of what's expressing the energy of that purpose is consciousness. In matter of fact, the Sanskrit word is Sat Chit Ananda, truth, consciousness, and bliss. And why? Because it's blissful to exist. It's Ananda, it's love to exist. And to be conscious of existing is the greatest existence there is. So self-awareness is the fruit of this evolutionary purpose for the nature to be able to create a body that was able to hold consciousness sufficiently that it could become self-aware is evidence of the purpose of existence. That we are the fruit, the flowers of that original ancient primal purpose. Okay, so this principle is the purpose of life. No more than that. But it's also ultimately for that principle to wake up. And it can only wake up as each of us. It is only right now what's going on with you is you are awakening. The quality of the truth of what you are is awakening in the person of you. And when this happens, when we come to the verge of the next step of coming into existence, there will be some excitement and some terror. That's the evidence that we are manifesting something more than what we were before. Okay, now you're going to help me bring me back to where you were coming from. Got a little too expanded there. I gotta go back.
No, I liked hearing that.
Okay, good.
But I guess the
Oh,
feel of
collective
the
error,
air.
the
yeah,
collective error.
yeah.
Okay, because inevitable, nature doesn't know what she's doing. Inevitably.
But it sounded like you were saying before, or it felt like you were saying that's a source of so much.
Yeah,
and I don't
you don't see
I
it
don't-
that way.
I don't feel it.
That's right. That's good for you. You don't feel it.
Well-
A lot of people do, but I'm glad you don't.
I guess I should feel it.
No need to feel it if it's not there.
Not as pain, but
Yeah. So
as
would you
something
understand
else.
that what I use the word error because that as a way of defining that in order for consciousness to wake up, it had to forget itself. It had to move away from its own original nature to be able to appreciate what it was. It had to become ignorance to know knowledge. It had to become forgetfulness to wake, to remember. It had to become dark in order to know light. So the error is that process that was inevitable in the formation of duality, where there had to be darkness for there to be light in order for us to be able to wake up to anything. Otherwise, it would have been just the one ocean. So that process that is in everything living, that inherent qualities that nature were able to develop, our bodies carry the record. It's in our genes. It's in our program, DNA. We carry the entire evolutionary record. We also carry the stars and the material, the minerals that came out of the physical formation of existence. The whole thing carries that boundary and that definition and that separation that is part of the error. And through the evolution of mankind, the last 200 million years, it's been mankind has rose out of the bestiality of the body it had inherited and began to develop behaviors that we now consider human. And that there was a struggle initially because that was the habit, that was the programming. You eat when you're hungry and you protect your own, or you live just for yourself, or you live for your family, or you live just for your village. That whole tribal consciousness was evidence of the unfolding of the collective error coming to a place where it could wake up enough, where it could begin to take over from nature and begin to create something that nature couldn't create on her own. So each of us, in order to do that, our first task is to meet that piece of the collective error that each of us inherited. Now, we don't carry near as much collective error of 200 years ago or 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago. Our collective error is greatly reduced. That's why we can be as awake as we are, as cooperative as we are, as self-aware as we are, and have some ability to manage our moods and our emotions that came out of the process of creating bodies. So our first task is to meet our piece of the collective error, which we inherited from mom and dad, and they're from their mom and dad.
You want
And
to
from
give an
their mom and
example? Give an example.
Yeah. No, you got it?
no, when you bring it down to that level,
You get it.
I get it.
Yeah.
I can feel it.
Yeah, good. And that's a good way to know. If you can feel it, then that's That means you got the sensor that says truth, untruth.
Wow.
You know, when the
Yeah.
body wakes up
Yeah.
enough, it can say real, unreal. It knows without you thinking.
Mm.
And that's why it's really important to get the body on your side in this game.
Thank you.
You got it? Very good. Thank you. All right. Okay, time. All right, tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, I do the same thing. And what I invite you to do, for those of, I mean, if you come back or not, it's your choice. But there is something that has been set in motion tonight. There's been good listening, that this energy has penetrated into you. You know, receiving isn't understanding, it isn't even feeling. It's something else that will change your energetic basis. It has to do with your existence. That's question one, the quality of your very existence. So pay attention to that. Notice, let it come forward in you without having a story. It's my experience that when we open, there is a tangible sense of greater love, greater sense of connection, relaxation, or greater recognition, greater awareness of that which has previously been not obscured to us or unavailable to us. So it's a changing of the frequency, the vibrational field of your frequency, so that as you leave this room, you will be carrying a quality of perception that is perhaps not normal for you. And if you pay attention to that, just feel that, or be aware of what's arising in you, and not try to control it or do something with it, it'll have time to permeate into your system. And if you come or not, you will have gotten the best value you could have gotten out of our time together. All right, so we're going to sit silent and still for a few minutes. And silent and still is not necessarily meditation. It may be, but you're just sitting in your chair. Best to have your feet on the ground and just be aware of your breath. Notice what's going on. And what I ask you, those of you who are regular meditators, also take your attention and check out your body. Just go down into your heart, go down into your belly, go down into your groin, go down into your thighs and your calves and your feet, just to check out your body, to let the energy be able to permeate into parts of your body that it doesn't normally. Okay. So we'll just start. You'll hear the gong, and we'll end with a gong, and then I'll leave the room. So I want to thank you all for coming in advance. Om Namo Brahmane Satchitananda Murtaye. Om Namo Brahmane Satchitananda Murtaye. Om Namo Brahmane Satchitananda Murtaye. All glory to Gurudev. Namaste. And I would like to have Radha come up and talk about the SAT weekend that's starting on Friday for those who might be interested and answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. There are still some openings for anyone who is interested in the 3-day weekend coming up. It's going to be Friday evening through